Welcome. My name is Chris Freen. I'm Development Officer for Warwickshire Community and Voluntary Action, thankfully known in the abbreviation form as CAVA. This webinar is a follow-up to Stratford District Council's Community Grant Scheme. And we'll use the Community Grant Scheme as examples through the webinar. But you don't have to have applied for the scheme to benefit, and we welcome those people outside the Stratford district as well. Obviously, my particular role is just for Stratford district, so if you are out of the district, then I can put you in touch with my colleagues or other organisations if you're outside the district. But in essence, it's aimed at Stratford district and Community Grant Scheme and those interested in capital funding. So that's the webinar. So who are CAVA? We're a charity. We are Warwickshire's Council for Voluntary Service, traditionally known as a CVS. We're funded by the districts, County Council, Integrated Care Board, and our own revenue. In essence, we are about supporting voluntary and community groups in Warwickshire and Solihull. How do we do that? We help groups identify and secure funding, and we'll touch on today how difficult that can be. We also support groups if they want to know how to manage volunteers more effectively, and also manage the recruitment of volunteers. That isn't my part of responsibility, but Karen Thompson, who's my colleague at Stratford, is responsible for that. We also support groups' organisational development. So if a group wants to become a charity, wants to become a social enterprise, wants to know about governance, training, anything to do initially about organisational development, we can help groups with that. We can't always do because our capacity is limited, but we might know somebody who can if that isn't feasible. And we also represent the sector on strategic bodies as well. So that's CAVA. My particular role is on funding and organisational development. So I can help groups get funding ready. Have you got the right policies? Have you got the right structure? Do you know what structure you are? That's always a good question. We can do funding searches, and we also have themed lists, and one of those being a capital funding list, which we will send out with the information pack. I think some of you have already probably had that and have had some success with that, which is good. We also can advise on evidencing need. You know, what are the strategic documents that exist in the district? We can provide feedback on draft applications. You know, we're on your side. It's difficult, as we'll come on to. Anything that gives you the edge, you know, we're here to help. We can signpost to training and additional information. We can signpost you to how to create a case for support. We'll touch on that briefly. And as you probably know, some funders don't have an application form, so we can provide you with some template letters to adapt and send off to funders. So that's my role. So I wanted to touch on what is the present funding situation in the country. So some of you will be fully aware of this, but grant funding is oversubscribed and is getting, from an oversubscription point of view, getting worse. Some of that is down to AI. More and more groups are thinking it's potentially easier to blanket cover applications through the use of AI. and we'll touch on the pros and cons of that a little bit tonight. But certainly demand is growing as well, as COVID, cost of living challenges, and now the Iran war. So demand is going up, more applications, and some funders, certainly a trend, I think, for some funders to spend up or tighten up their criteria as a means to reduce the number of applications that are coming in. So what is the success rates like? Success rates in applying for funding, which is a difference from fundraising, which we'll touch on, especially for small charities, success rates are modest. Typical grants success sits around 1 in 7, 1 in 10. But small charities often experience lower rates. Perhaps they don't have the capacity, capability as some of the bigger, medium-sized charities. So it is tough, and as I touched on, part of my role is to try and reduce those odds for Stratford groups. As we know, capital projects are harder to plan, costs are going up, inflation, energy costs, etc. And this is contrary to what mentioned about AI, because not saying that AI is the be and end all, and that's boosting people's success rates, but it does have a role, I think, is that relationships matter more and more than blanket sending out in a cold calling sense to as many funders as you can blanket cover. A well-timed phone call, talking to the funder, starting to build up a relationship is important and useful. Okay, moving on. So we mentioned that this is a follow-up to Stratford District Council's Community Grant Scheme. So I thought it was useful. I've only seen 4 applications that went into the grant scheme. So I haven't seen, because of data protection, I haven't seen vast majority of applications, but I have had feedback from Stratford District Council of what some of the key issues were, and that's built into this presentation today. But in terms of the scheme, 88 groups had contact with Stratford District Council. 44, according to Stratford District Council, attended the information sessions. As I attended all 4, I think that's a bit underestimation myself, but hey ho, that was the figure that came back. 10 groups followed up and asked questions by email. In terms of the small grant scheme, 24 groups applied, 3 were successful. Of those, 9 were considered, and I won't embarrass anybody, obviously, 9 were considered as poor applications. Some were middling and some were very good. In terms of the large grants, 34 applied and 5 were successful. I think those who have been successful are starting to learn either last week or this week, because 1 or 2 groups have started to contact me in that regard. So 32 groups separately to that had some contact with me following the information sessions or information that went out. And 4 groups asked me for feedback on their draft application, which now I don't know, certainly that didn't tip the case for those who applied for the small grants, but there's no guarantees with these things. But some of them had particular issues. I think there was an issue with the lease with 1, etc., etc. So, some of these are deal breakers, whatever feedback I can give them. So that I thought was useful just to give you a snapshot in terms of that. I believe I haven't seen all the letters that have gone out, but your point of contact is Emma Gerdag. I think she is amenable to giving some feedback, but obviously it's a lot of groups, so it really depends what she's put in the letter on that. But obviously some of the key feedback is collectively tonight. So what does that mean for an approach to capital funding? Those first two things, the last two slides, which is the present situation and a practical example of a recent funding round. So these are some kind of general suggestions of approaches to securing capital funding. And then we'll go on to, in a more practical sense, the top 10 top tips when applying for funding. So first one, and apologies if you're fully on board on this one, but really consider treating your search as a capital campaign. What do we mean by that? And okay, if you want £5,000 of capital funding, then you might not necessarily go down that route. But if you're after 1 million, 200,000, 100,000, and who knows what the threshold is, but I think there's some points in the literature on capital campaigns that will help any search for funding. So what is a capital campaign? It's really a coordinated organizational effort. So it's about the whole organization, the whole group coming together to achieve a goal and a timetable to raise a specific amount of funding. It's not delegating the role and responsibility to someone. It's about a whole organization approach. What I will do is send out this document, Capital Campaigns by the DSC, and that goes into more detail about what a capital campaign involves. Might be teaching to suck eggs, and I know this is sometimes difficult for small groups, but really have the right people involved with the right skills. I think there will be different skills needed for people who are applying for funding. Somebody who's meticulous, enjoys the detail, etc., and somebody who's on the fundraising side, which might be about relationships and getting out there and meeting people. Might be teaching you to suck eggs, but I think it's really important. I've seen some campaigns in the district where, you could say they might not necessarily have picked the right person to lead that, but that's not my call, obviously. Other things, start with a clear strategy. If you're going down the campaign route, must be rooted in a clear mission, values and strategic need. What I think is really important is trying to have a funding mix. So it's about fundraising, which is things like crowdfunding, events, quiz nights, fish and chip suppers, etc., and applying for funding. Okay, if you want £5,000, then you might be able to get that with an application. But if you're going for a more higher level of amount, then you will definitely need a mix of that. And that is really important. We say more and more that groups, whatever they're seeking funding for, should have a good funding mix because of the things we've alluded to in terms of the demand is increasing and fundraisers have less chances are getting harder. Other approaches, there's really got to be strong leadership. You know, the board, trustees, committee, senior volunteers must give, advocate, and help solicit funding. So I always say, certainly on the fundraising side, it's like a spider's web. Do you, as the committee members, your family members or your friends, do they know people of high net worth individuals, say, or donors, or are trustees on charitable trusts? So work your network, try and identify people out there that can contribute. So it's a warm approach to a funder rather than a cold call. Next one is test before you launch. You know, I've seen a few campaigns in the district which I don't think, you know, haven't really seriously done that feasibility study. Is it going to be feasible to raise the money, the amount of money? People start out with a huge amount of enthusiasm, but what happens if you get just 50% of the money that you want, and somebody leaves, enthusiasm flags? For a considerable amount of money, you know, you are talking 2, 3, 4 years worth of work needed. Really do a robust feasibility study. Is the funding out there that's available? Is it going to be practical to raise that money before you embark on it? Just another thing, it's on the fundraising side, and I'll show you where to get some good training on the fundraising side later. But certainly the training says, in terms of capital campaign, you have a quiet phase, early doors, as part of the campaign, where you try and raise a considerable amount of money before going public. Let's just use an example of the type of things that can be done in a fundraising campaign. As I say, more information later. And build a compelling case for support, which is like a pitch document. I'll send you information on a case for support as a follow-up. So every successful capital campaign grows out of a compelling story. Have you got a good story? And as we'll touch on, you know, if you're wading through 50 applications, which is quite practical per week as a funder, you warm and you're more appreciative of a good story. That's the first section, just a setting of the scene section. I will see if there's any questions in the chat. Yes, we've had one question. Is it possible to find out from SDC how they're rated as application? I don't know. You just, I'm afraid, Ron. Obviously, I was at arm's length from the process because I was advising groups. So I reach out to Emma and ask that, but I can't answer for her, I'm afraid. Any other questions, or if anybody wants to unmute and ask a question at this stage? No? Okay. Right. I'll close that chat and move on. So these are top 10 tips for securing funding for capital funding. Mostly emphasis on applying for funding, but we'll touch on a little bit in fundraising, possibly. So the first advice, and this is all some of the advice that was fed back from Stratford District Council and is common knowledge as well. Read the guidance carefully, and I would say a minimum of 3 times. Not everybody's cup of tea, I appreciate that, but really read the guidance. Make sure you fit the funders' priorities. With a 1 in 7, 1 in 10 chance, don't waste your time if you're not going to meet their priorities or they don't align with yours. What's really important in terms of a mindset is, and some groups do this, and I don't know if this was a theme in the Stratford District Council, is you are meeting the funders' priorities. They're not meeting yours. And that's really an important mindset to get into. In a practical sense, it's always useful to make a note of the key words that the funder uses and phrases and include them in your response. That's what they're interested in, and it's no harm in doing that. Certainly a theme that came back from Stratford District Council: provide all the information requested. Every time I touched base with Emma, she was kind of pulling her hair out that she was having to chase groups who hadn't put all the information in the application. So don't get on the wrong side of funders. I'm sure it didn't play a significant part, but other funders nationally may take a slightly different approach. Do they use, as we've touched on, funders are increasing their criteria, tightening up their criteria, and that could easily be one that knocks you out of the funding round if you haven't put all the information in. Second tip, answer every question. And I want to use an example from the community fund here. In all the applications I was asked to comment on, all the groups had just ticked one box in the funding objectives section. So they hadn't fully read and absorbed that there was marks for each of these objectives. And if they'd only ticked one, they had a potential loss of 30 marks. Now, I'm not asking you to tick the box if it's not relevant, but when we teased it out with those groups that came back for some feedback, it was obvious that they ticked most. Obviously, the final one was a bit difficult. If you're not, creation of a new community asset, and I don't think any of them tick that one in the end. So it's an example of answering every question, knowing you fully absorb the guidance, and that can only be beneficial. The second tip in answering every question is, and this came back from Emma at STC, use the word count. If you've got a 250 word, that is your opportunity to sell your project and shine in relation to the funder. That said, don't fill it with waffle. Funders can smell it a mile away. But if there's you're really making the case, try and maximize your word count. What I always recommend as well is, if the funder gives you little prompts, so in this instance, there was the fund objectives, and there was a details column. So I would recommend cut and pasting those questions and those prompts in the guidance and using those as headers in your answer. So if you had ticked the improving resilience, cut and paste that first prompt. How will your project ensure the facility space can stay functional and operation for many years to come? And specifically answer that. A lot of funding applications I see, people put in and answer questions what they want to answer and put forward, not what the funder is asking for. So in this one, you're really tight. You're really answering what the funder has asked for. And as we'll touch on, the more quotes, stories, interesting things you can put in response to those, the better it will read. If word count becomes a problem, you can always delete the headers then at a later date, but I always try and keep them in. People marking your application will be pleased and relieved that you're answering the question and they know it's how it's structured. So that is a definite tip I would suggest. Third tip is be clear and concise. Try and use the first person if you can. Use plain language, short sentences, avoid jargon. Don't assume that they know or that you've included it in an answer to another question. You've got to put it in the answer to the question they're asking, even if you think you've included it elsewhere. Check their AI policy. Some organisations like the lottery welcome groups using AI because they say it makes it easier for groups. The smaller funders are less keen because they're the ones who are being inundated. The National Lottery have got enough staff to deal with all those applications. But whatever you do, I would always write the first draft in your style. But AI does have some benefits. So moving on, show real need. Traditionally, in many applications, this is the most important section. Can you demonstrate a need for a particular project linked to the funder's priorities? This was certainly an area that Emma thought was an area of weakness from some applications. So what could you do to help? Certainly use a mixture of quantitative and qualitative data. Use local strategies that are available. AI may be able to help you identify those. One of the big strategic documents is the District Council's Growing the Future strategy. There's a hyperlink there to that. And then there is Warwickshire data as well. I was surprised a lot of, I only saw 4. The ones I did see, no mention of neighbourhood plans at a local level. Obviously surveys, consultations, they do take time, but if you've got those in place, they can only benefit. This is another tip that funders are increasingly interested in, is that beneficiaries have had some involvement in designing and delivering the project. So it's not a top-down. And if you can give an example of where feedback from a group or in some individuals has led on to a different change in the project, that is a really powerful addition. Quotes, conversations in the community, meeting minutes, probably the committee members or trustees probably live in the area. All those are important as well in terms of showing need. And the final one is those stories. If you can put some stories in, okay, you will be limited by time, but you can refine those down to some interesting stories that show the need and are of interest. Moving on, impact, what difference you will make. Again, Stratford District Council felt this was an area of weakness for a variety of funders. So on a basic level, know the difference between outcomes and outputs. So outcomes is that overall difference. So you've reduced perhaps social isolation, and outputs is you've had increased attendances of people attending. So know the differences on those. Know what success looks like matched to the funders' priorities. Have clear, achievable results. Attention to monitoring, and that's really important. How you're going to justify that you've achieved what you set out to do. Case studies are always welcome. And as we touched on, capture quotes, testimonials, they're all helpful. And as we touch on, things like that you could put into your case for support, which we'll touch on in a bit. And simple things, you could have a little postcard where people, respond, how social isolation, say, has been reduced. So there's lots of stuff out there that you can access, and we'll put some links into the follow-up email as well. Not everybody's cup of tea, I know that. It's not my particular cup of tea. I don't know if I'm a complete finisher, but that's also the importance of having a team approach. And there may be somebody who's interested in that capturing of the impact. Okay, moving on. Number 6.
Okay.
Create a realistic budget. Explaining costs clearly, justify each budget line, and it's always useful to have a narrative column as well to explain a particular budget line. One area that you need to be aware of is reserves. And obviously, if you've got 100k of unrestricted reserves in the bank and you're applying for 50k, the funder quite understandably might turn around and say, why aren't you using your own money? So obviously, if you have restricted reserves and you've allocated it for, we want to replace the roof in 3 years' time, we've allocated X to that. We're going to revamp the heating. That's allocated to that. You can quite legitimately put the amounts into restricted reserves on your accounts. But narrative column is always helpful, explaining things that you might think the funder might pick up. 7, it's always useful to put in your evidence of your track record. Have you had past successes? What's your experience? A lot of funders like partnerships. Have you got good partnerships? Are you networking with a variety of agencies? Just shows you that willingness to reach out and work with us. Also, I suppose in this, funders like to know that you're approaching other organisations or have approached other organisations for funding. A lot of funders don't like to be the 100% funder, and that's proportionate. You know, if you're applying just for £5,000, that's slightly different. But you know, if you've secured funding from other funders, that shows you've got a good track record. You're doing the extra mile in that respect, and it's also in terms of fundraising. You know, you've raised X amount with fundraising. Just shows you that community willingness to get behind this project, and that's always welcomed by funders. So top tip 8 is tailor your application to each funder. As we touched on before, show that you understand funders' mission and priorities. Come back if you want a template. We have a couple of templates which you can adapt when funders ask you to provide a letter because they don't have an application form. Some of the perhaps smaller funders and some of the localized funders will just want you to send them a template letter. And, you know, that's your case to make the case. And it has to be a bit more than, you know, please can we have £5,000? You've really got to just justify the case, make the case for that. 9, demonstrate sustainability. Funders are quite sensitive about the project will carry on after their grant. They want that to happen. Have you got a robust plan to achieve that? Slightly different with capital, I suppose, but certainly the case in revenue. And, you know, will the funding create long-lasting impact, which you'd like to think a lot of capital funding would do that. So that would be important to state. And the final top tip, get somebody. It's so easy to get word blind when you're writing applications, and I know it only too well. Proofread and get a second opinion, so they can check for errors. Is there anything missing? Not answering the question is a big one. People put in an answer what they want to put in rather than reading the question. I understand, you know, you want to put your what you do, what you know, but does it ask for that? And you know, get somebody else to give it a sense check. As we'll touch on, very happy to do that if I've got the capacity for Stratford district groups at any point. And I won't send it back with lots of red biro involved through it. I will be sensitive to your effort, and what I would do is just kind of add comments into a column, comments column. I never rewrite people's work, so it's just, have you thought about this? I don't think you're answering the question on this section, etc. So that's a whiz through. Lots of information, as I said right at the beginning, but let's move on to any particular questions, and I will look in the chat. Feel free to add in any further questions. Yeah, so Mary, how can you show need when there is sometimes a tight word count? That's always a challenge, isn't it? Certainly, the feedback I do give is, I'll say perhaps this paragraph in this section, they're not asked for that. Why have you given it him? So if you, so not that I would have, it's your call. If you want to put it in, that's your call. But if you don't put that in, that opens up, that gives you so many words to play about with to be more effective. So need is really traditionally seen as the most important thing. So that's really got to be tight in terms of that section. No waffle on that. Some hard data and some qualitatively fluffy stuff as well. Is that a technical term? I don't know, but something more for the heart as well as the brain. It is a challenge, I know that, but there's ways and means of getting under that. Certainly, once you've done the section, I would always read the section or get somebody else to read it, and there's always words that are superfluous. You don't need to put in, this is a marvelous project, or some of those, what's the technical term, the more descriptive, decorous words, but that's not needed. Short sentences, sharp, to the point. But yeah, it's always a challenge. So Richard, if we say we can match fund or at least make a percentage contribution, does that increase our chances of success? Obviously, there will be probably a budget section in applications, and there may well be a match funding opportunity. I know, for example, the Stratford District Council Climate Change Fund, which is going to be relaunched shortly, £200,000 for climate projects in Stratford District. Watch this space on the District Council website. That has a section that will mark you from 0 to 5 on the amounts of match funding that you can have secured. So I think that's really important. I think it shows that the project has a collective commitment, the community is behind it, and they've secured some funding. Obviously, timing is always a difficulty in that you're applying at different times, but yeah, you can only do your best on that. I know there are, don't shoot me here. I know there are advocates out there who would say, are the trustees contributing financially to this project? Okay, that's always a difficult one, but it shows willing, doesn't it, in terms of getting behind it? Not for everybody, I know, but that's certainly important to show that there's a commitment there from the project. Okay, Julie, is the percentage of success applications you said always around the small 13%, large 15% success mark? Is this for Stratford District Council? Obviously, the national trend is 1 in 7. It has been articulated as being 1 in 10. Some funders, like the National Lottery Awards for All, probably traditionally pre-COVID had a 50% success rate. So each fund will have a slightly different. Some publish that, not many do. Postcode Lottery, I think, is about 16%. And those figures are coming down. So the 1 in 7 is really a national snapshot. 1 in 7, 1 in 10. But if you if you adopt some of the things that we're talking about today, and about to talk about, then you can increase the chances. No guarantees. It's always a competitive process. But you're up against competition there. Okay, that seems to be all the questions. So moving on, I think. So where is further help available? Okay, CAVA. That link takes us to our website, and all our support is free. And we touched on right at the beginning what we can do to help. So that's funding, volunteers, group development is the main areas. There is also a Stratford district questionnaire, funding questionnaire. That's the hyperlink to that. I'll put that in the follow-up email as well. If you do that, that gives me all the information I need to respond to you with either a funding search, or if it's more complicated, I can arrange a one-to-one meeting. If there's any, and sorry, I don't know if this is the case, is there any CICs out there, then it would be better to contact our sister organisation, CWCDA, because they're the experts in social enterprise funding. And also, if there's any statutory organisations out there, that's not our area of expertise. If we can, we will offer some support and advice to parish and town councils, but we're not experts in the elements of statutory funding, 106 agreements or precepts, etc. So, but if we can and we've got the capacity, we will offer support to town and parish councils. Additional training, I think Get Grants is a private company, but they offer really affordable training. I think it's £12 to go on one of their webinars. Cheap at half the price. Not as cheap as us, but hey ho. That's really good stuff. They will do a lot of information about capital campaigns and the timing of capital campaigns, and that's some really good stuff on there, and it is affordable. And they've done training for CAVA in the past, and we've done and publicised that to groups as well. So we know Get Grants as a credible company, and they're local, so that's good. There are things as professional bid writers and consultancies who will take your capital campaign on. I no information as to that, but obviously it is an option certainly if it's a sizable project. And where to go for funding searches. We'll put this also in the follow-up email as well. But we now have a state-of-the-art database on our website, so you can register that. That's CAVA for Community database. So you register for that, and you can do a detailed funding search, put in your details, etc., and that will produce a really robust funding search as well on that. We will send out the capital capital campaigns information and also the capital list as well to all those who signed up to the webinar. One area that has been fruitful in the past is community infrastructure levy funding, or CIL, and this is a collected amount of funding that comes from house builders in the district and goes into a central pot. 2 or 3 years ago, there was 2 years of open access and open applications to that. That has now finished, and the decisions are made in-house within Stratford District Council. How you get onto the CIL list, I don't know. All I can recommend is speaking to your local district councillor about that, and he or she may know to get on the list for that, if applicable. But it's something that you know, we would always recommend reaching out to your local district councillor as well. Conscious 6 minutes. We'll probably take some last questions at the end as well. Okay, I'm conscious that at certain parts I might have been pessimistic, but success is feasible. Success is possible. This is a section out of my annual report 2 or 3 years ago, and you've got 2 pictures here. On the left is Wixford Village Hall as was. It was condemned and no longer used, and a vital community resource that had been there for a century and a bit. I think it had just had its centenary. The committee reached out to me. I identified a variety of funding opportunities. Now, it was in the days of the community ownership scheme and open access for CIL, so it's a different scenario. But at the end of the day, after what happened is the committee, or Sue on the committee, would write the first draft. I would then feed back and say and give feedback on the draft. We'd go through a variety of versions, and then they would submit. And you know, that partnership brought in £420,927 £927,000, as it says on the slide. They also secured a variety of more funding, which I wasn't party to. And this is a top tip as well: get somebody in the local community to win the postcode lottery. Because if they do, they are given £50,000 to distribute to local projects. So yeah, luckily that was able to go in the pot as well. Not available to everybody. So success is possible, and you know, it's trying to increase your chances of success going forward. So next steps before questions. Contact me at any time if you're a Stratford District group. If you send in your questionnaire, sometimes I can just respond to that, or a more detailed thing. If I've got the capacity, happy to meet one-to-one, usually online, to make that simpler. I would certainly recommend to sign up to our e-Grapevine newsletter. That is jam-packed full of good information for voluntary and community groups, and there will be a variety of funds that are advertised in that newsletter. We thoroughly recommend groups becoming a CAVA member, because we are representing groups and societies and the voluntary sector. No cost to that, but it is important that we have the backing. You can vote at our AGM, etc., and you can become a member via our website. That's my email address, that's my number, and you will know those details anyway from correspondence. I will send out a information following this, not tonight, but over the next week or so. So looking at final questions, Mike, is there an available grant funding list or database available? Yeah, I think we've answered that. And I will send out the capital list to all those who have signed up. I think you just answered my question. Hi, ironic. Yes. I should have gone down and read it, shouldn't I? Does the database do that based on a criteria search like playgrounds or energy? I don't know if it's so specific, but there's a variety of criteria which you can filter it down to. Yes, I can't remember, but I doubt playgrounds. Probably recreation is probably the lowest kind of sub criteria on that. So is allocated to parish council to have a parish plan? I suppose certainly in terms of need, I think having a parish plan and liaising with parish and town councils, so it's a symbiotic relationship. Your project gets on into strategic documents and you reference strategic documents, I think is important. Yeah, so that's that. I think we are bang on time, but I will unshare if I can. Let's have a look. It's defeated me Teams. I knew it would. Let's have a go. This is the first time I've done Teams, so I thought I can't unshare. So, any final questions? Thank you very much for attending. Any final questions from the floor? No? Lots of information, I know. Lots of information. Some of it you will already know. Some of it is always helpful, but I'm here to help if going forward for the Stratford groups. So thank you very much for taking the time. I know you're all busy doing great work in the community. Thank you for all that. Much appreciated. The backbone of local society. So thank you. And thank you for this evening and good luck.